Welcome to the third of 4 tours through presidential aircraft, and this one was Eisenhower's Air Force One from 1954 to 1961. This Lockheed VC-121E was a modified Super Constellation, which is arguably one of the prettiest aircraft ever. I'll comment on its design as well as its VIP status, and use some other footage of Super Constellations to explain things. It had a distinctive triple tail, and it was purely practical. Aircraft were getting bigger and needed larger tail fins, but because hangars weren't yet tall enough, they were able to spread the fin's size over 3 smaller fins rather than having a single large fin, and it would have the same total surface area. One big advantage with the Constellation was cabin pressurization, which meant that they could fly higher and into much smoother weather. While this wasn't the first pressurized airliner, that was the Boeing 307 Stratoliner, it was the first widely used one. You'll see this is called Columbine III, after the state flower of Colorado, and it's Eisenhower's third Connie. You'll notice how close the propeller tip is to the ground, and this is why the whole aircraft is very high and that nose wheel strut especially looks very long. The idea was to have big lazy engines with large propellers to maximize efficiency, but obviously then they had to raise the whole plane up off the ground to ensure that the propellers wouldn't hit the runway. In fact, the nose bends down a little just so that the landing gear doesn't have to be even longer. Now let's focus less on this aircraft type and more on this actual piece of history that we're going to be walking into. Its most important mission took place in 1955 when it flew Eisenhower to Geneva in Switzerland for the first peacetime summit with Western and Soviet leaders. It had a crew of 8, and we'll have a look at a few different positions. In the cockpit you have the pilot on the left, co-pilot on the right, and behind them was the flight engineer. Because automation was much less advanced than now, the pilots would be very busy just flying the plane, so other systems such as the fuel, hydraulics, pressurization and engine performance were all monitored by the engineer. Eventually, their role was replaced by computers in much newer aircraft, so massive aircraft like the Boeing 747 can get away with a total of just 2 crew. Taking a step back, we have the radio operator's position. In front is a sextant, which the navigator could use with the astrodome in the roof to work out their location via the stars. And then, where I'm standing now, and in the middle of the doorway, would be a fold-out table and the navigator's position. He had access to a whole range of equipment, including ground mapping radars, to ensure that they were in the correct location. Spinning around, we'll make our way towards the back. Here we have the crew's quarters, with multiple tables and chairs and also more storage space for luggage. Now I didn't mention it earlier, but it's powered by 4 Wright R3350 Cyclone engines, and they were notoriously unreliable. It was actually quite common to turn off an engine in flight and land on 3. In fact, engineers used to joke that it was the best 3-engined airliner in the world. There's also a safe in here where the nuclear codes would be stored while the president was on board. Now the next position is the galley, which would provide meals for both the crew and the president. There was no separate one for the president, so the meals for the 8 crew and 24 passengers would all be prepared here. There's more storage space and then a toilet for the crew, with the president's toilet right down the end. By the way, it was this aircraft's predecessor, Columbine II, that was the first aircraft actually called Air Force One. In 1953, whilst flying as Air Force 8610, a commercial plane, Eastern Airlines 8610, entered Eisenhower's airspace. Now there were rumours of the 2 aircraft almost colliding, but that appears to have been an embellishment, and the change was just after they thought that it could be a possible source of confusion in the future. It wasn't until quite a few years later that the Air Force One name became official. Here we are with more chairs and tables for the many staff travelling with the president. And then we enter the presidential stateroom, which almost looks less impressive and exclusive than some of the older aircraft, with a large table noticeably missing. You have this 16mm projector, which would have been the height of entertainment back in the 50s, when this was flying. Otherwise, there's bigger and more comfortable chairs and tables for the staff to do their work. There's also these 2 long lounges that could be converted into a bed. This aircraft continued in VIP transport after Eisenhower left office, and was officially retired in 1966 and flown to this museum for permanent display. Next up is more storage space, and right down the end of the aircraft is the presidential lavatory. This was certainly more luxurious than previous presidential aircraft, and possibly even more spacious than the later 707 based models. Then moving back towards the door, we see the fold-up electric ladder. This could be used if there weren't any tall enough air stairs, as remember that this is a big aircraft and nothing else was that tall off the ground from this era. And here we are having one final glance at that iconic triple tail. And then turning around and looking forward was the replacement for this aircraft, the VC-137, and my tour through that aircraft and many others is on my channel. Thanks for watching.